If you've been on YouTube anytime within the last 5 years, then you've most likely seen a video about someone who figured out a way to get a house for free. But if you take the time to watch more than one of these videos, then you'll realize that there's actually a few different ways to get a house with no money out of pocket. And yes, it is possible to buy a house without losing any money. So how do you do it? Before we get into the nitty-gritty details, you have to understand that if you want to buy a house that you will actually live in, then you have to have some kind of money to use as leverage. Otherwise, nothing you say to the seller will matter because you can't give them anything. And that is the first lesson you can derive from all these videos. In order to get a really good deal, you have to be the one that holds the leverage. If the person on the other side of the table knows that you need the deal, they'll use it to their advantage when negotiating with you. You'll have no choice but to accept their deal, or try and bluff your way out of it. Instead, what you want to do is only enter negotiations with people if you don't need the deal. As soon as you're able to walk away from a negotiation without suffering any loss, you have all the leverage. And when it comes to getting houses for free, you have to be prepared and willing to walk away from anything that doesn't meet the specific criteria you're looking for. So with that in mind, how do these transactions work? And are these people really getting houses for free? Well, the short answer is yes. The houses are free and people really are buying them and getting all of their money back. But in order to get a free house, you have to wait until after you sell it or refinance it before you can really consider it free. Think of these processes like using your house as something to put money into. Really, all that you need to do to break even is to store your money into a property until it's time for you to refi or sell, and then do so to get it all back. No property is free until you sell it or refinance it. But what you can do to actually turn a profit is to buy a house that's undervalued. That's a lot easier said than done. But if you find a house that could sell for more money than it currently is, then snag it before someone else can. By the way, I made these videos entirely to help viewers like you learn a little bit more about the world of real estate. I don't do ads on here, and all the growth is from the word of mouth. So if you could share this video with a friend, then it would mean the world to me. Putting in offers before anybody else ties back to what I said earlier about having leverage when you're negotiating. The reason it's beneficial to be the earliest person to put an offer in on a property is because you have all the leverage. As soon as the seller gets a second offer, they can start comparing the two, which will essentially make them compete to see who will step out first. It's basic supply and demand. Now, supply and demand is a ratio between how much there is of something and how many people want it. So when a property is first put on the market, there is an infinite amount of supply, even though it's just one unit of something, because there is zero demand. Anything divided by zero is undefined, meaning you'll have the highest chance of having a favorable negotiation the sooner you can put an offer in. Really, this advice can be used no matter what transaction you're initiating. But what processes do these people use to get houses for free? Probably the most popular method of getting free real estate is by using a method known as cash out refinance or cash out refi. The way it works is investors will buy an undervalued property that needs some simple repairs for as low as of a price as possible, and then spend money on investment to raise the property's value. This equity is then taken out and used to pay out the debt of the original mortgage. So let's say if you buy a home for $100,000 and you give $20,000 upfront, you still owe the remaining $80,000. But if you do renovations, repairs on the home, that made the home worth now $200,000. Then you'll have $120,000 of equity, which you can use to pay off the remaining $80,000. In this case, you would actually profit $100,000. This is super exaggerated explanation that really happens, but that's why it's so important to look for undervalued properties that you can raise value for. You can even go one step further and get lower interest rate by going to different banks and seeing if they can be raised from competitors. This is what Grant Stevens did, and he ended up paying zero because he got the house for free. If he didn't, then he would have paid $585,000 for a $965,000 property, including interest payments. But you can get even more profit by adjusting the interest rates on your cash out refi. But there is a pretty big downfall to this method if you're a certain kind of person, and that's if you're an impatient kind of person. This method of investing in real estate sounds really quick and easy, and that's because it can be if you know what you're doing right. So anytime there's a deal that works well for this, it's snatched up immediately by people who do it all the time. If you are going to try the cash out refinancing method of buying a home, there's a few things you should keep in mind. First, start in a market you're familiar with. That's actually good advice for any kind of investment. If you invest in a market where you know what's going on and you know what a good deal looks like, you have a much lower chance of failure in the beginning than you would if you went somewhere else to invest. As you get better, you can begin expanding outwards to less local market because you have more experience regarding what to watch out for and what to keep in mind. Secondly, decide on whether you want money or stability when you're picking a property to invest in. There are two different ways to invest, and they really matter most depending on what time frame you're working with. You'll probably make a lot more money if you buy a property and make it into a short-term rental, but things will be a lot more stable if you buy a property and make it a long-term rental. And one last quick tip that will help you make a profit is significantly less cash out of your pocket if you're buying a primary residence. You do need to live there for a period of time, but you can continue moving as soon as the time is up and have several residences in a row that you can turn into investment properties. If you combine this with something like a 1031 exchange, you can make a lot of profit in a short period of time. Comment down below if you want to hear more about how that process works in the future.